Okay, so this is our weekly Maamar class. We're learning a Maamar about Shavuos. We started it a few weeks before Shavuos, but we didn't finish. So today is actually still Yemei Tashlumin of Shavuos. Back in the times of the Beis HaMikdash, and Amir Hashem very soon again, when you will bring your festival sacrifice for the Shavuos Yom Tov. Just even though Shavuos is only one day, not like Pesach and Sukkot, which are a week, but you still have a week to make up your korban. So we're still in the days of making up Shavuos. Now we're not going to finish the Maamar today, so I'll have to figure out an excuse why next week we're also learning about Shavuos, but I have my excuse for today. I also want to remind you that we're in the middle of the SoulWords annual campaign. I'm just going to be personal for a minute. It's a little bit hard to concentrate because I have so many calls still to make. We just hit 50% and we're finishing the campaign. Yes, Mazel Tov. But we're finishing the campaign tonight at midnight, so we got to bring in a lot of money between now and then. But here's the thing. Being here in class, this is what the money is for. This is one of the things the money is for. So to me, it's very grounding to have to take a break from the middle of the fundraising and come and have the class, because it just helps me to remember at the end of the day what the purpose of the fundraising is. So I'm going to try to be fully present here. It happens to be this is a pretty, I don't really think it's a difficult Maamar, but there's a lot of pieces. Oh, there's double matching, right. For every dollar you give, let me just do the whole thing. Charity.com/RST. Every dollar you give will be doubled until midnight tonight. Give under the team 5 Towns Tanya class if you want, or give under any team. But the people sitting here are involved in the 5 Towns Tanya team, so it'll be nice to give under that. And we'll put a link below. Okay.
It's just so interesting that in class we learn about like building a Dira B'Tachtonim for
Yes.
Hashem, and now we're trying to build a Dira for SoulWords.
Yes. That's so profound. Yes, yes. Yes, we're building a physical space for spiritual growth. It's quite poetic and profound. Okay.
Beautiful.
All right. So I'm not going to review the whole Maamar point for point. You could rewatch the previous 2 classes. I think the first week we covered first 2 chapters of the Maamar. No, actually, I think we've covered the first 3 chapters of the Maamar, and then last week we covered chapter 4. And last week actually was no class. It was 2 weeks ago. It was the day of Rabbi Kotlarski, Oliver Sholom's funeral. Okay, so I think we're on chapter 5. Does that make sense to everybody? And yes, can we confirm we're on chapter 5? That's where I believe we're at. And just to give you a little bit of context, and there's some new people here in real life. So this Maamar is an analysis of a Maamar of the Rebbe Maharash that was said 100 years before this Maamar. So the Rebbe is taking a Maamar from 100 years ago, from his predecessor, and analyzing it. And I'm not going to go point for point and remind you everything that we've been through, but just remember that the Maamar of the Rebbe Maharash was examining a couple of rabbinic sources from a Medrash, from a Yalkut Shimoni, about exactly what happened at Matan Torah, what changed in the world when Hashem gave the Torah. Let's just jump in, and I'll try as we go to remind you of the context, okay? So we're on chapter 5, all right? All right, so if you haven't been here before, you're being thrown straight into the deep end of the pool. All right. Chapter 5. Umamshich baham maimer de pirish Vayidaber gomer leimer hu. Now, the Rebbe says he continues in the Maamar. Continues in the Maamar means the Rebbe Marash's Maamar. He continues and says, what does the word lemor mean? Lemor means saying. Hashem said these words saying. What's the redundant lemor? Saying. Matan Torah Matan Torah nitan hakoyach lechol echod ve'echod mi Yisrael shekeshayikra b'Torah yakadosh baruch keira v'sheina kenegdai. That what happened at Matan Torah, lemor, saying, means that any time a Jew learns Torah, Hashem will say the words corresponding to him. That we were given this power, that our learning, so to speak, triggers in Hashem a reciprocal action of Hashem repeating the words that we are learning. Val derech zehu b'mitzvahs. Similarly, in mitzvahs, because this is talking about Torah, about learning, but also what about mitzvahs, performing mitzvahs? Dal yedei she'ish Yisrael oisa mitzvah hu geirim mamshech shakadosh baruch hu yasa oisa. That when a Jew does a mitzvah, it triggers that Hashem, so to speak, does that mitzvah. Like a matching campaign. That is, yes, exactly like a matching campaign. That is probably the real spiritual source of matching campaigns. Okay. V'hakoyach sheyesh b'chol echad miYisrael sha'idei limud haTorah shelo yeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu keira v'sheina kenegdei v'sha'al yedei ki mitzvah shelo yeh HaKadosh Baruch Hu mekaymes hamitzvos. Now this power that we were given, that when we learn Torah, Hashem says the words of Torah. And when we do mitzvahs, Hashem does those mitzvahs. Hu ayedei hadibur anechi avay lekecha loshen yachid ki mevur b'hamaymer. That power was granted through what? Through the word, or the words Anochi Havaya Alekecha. When Hashem says, I am the Lord, your God, so that chain of Anochi, which is the essence, Havaya, the ineffable name, Alekecha, the power which enlivens you, that formula of those names, that is what endows us with this power that when we learn Torah, Hashem reciprocates and learns the same Torah. When we do a mitzvah, Hashem reciprocates and does the same mitzvah. This is all explained in the Maamar of the Rebbe Marash. Okay. V'yesh leimer. Now, the Rebbe says we can say, and I've told you before when we learn Maamarim that when the Rebbe says V'yesh leimer, we could say the Rebbe is saying his own chiddush. In other words, the Rebbe just told us a synopsis of something that the Rebbe Marash had said 100 years ago. Now the Rebbe is going to extrapolate and interpret and offer his own novel insight. Okay. Da'ha'inyanim hamuvu'arim b'hamaimer b'tur hakdama lahapirish d'leimer shalima da'hatayra da'ha'adam geirim shiyakadosh baruch ha'keir v'sheina kenegdei. It's a long sentence, hard to parse, but the Rebbe is basically saying the concepts that the Rebbe Marash explains in his Maamar, and he explains them as a preface to the idea that when we learn, Hashem learns. And what is that concept that the Rebbe Marash teaches as a preface? Habitul di Yisrael al yidei shekadosh baruch hu shita bohem es shmai. It is what we spoke about last week. That actually we spoke about it 2 weeks ago, that Hashem, so to speak, paired his name with us. And also we explained another concept, which is that everything that falls lower comes from higher, so Hashem endowed us down here in the physical world with a power that comes ultimately from Anochi, which is above all names. So those concepts that the Rebbe Marash explained, Heim dugmas shore perushim b'leimer, they are related to the other explanations of this same word of leimer. Let me explain what's going on here. The Rebbe is basically taking a bunch of different ideas that appear to be unrelated and explaining how they all match up. I wish I had a chart so you could literally see it, but basically the Rebbe is taking the concepts that the Rebbe Marash taught in his Maamar and showing how they correspond to concepts from other rabbinic sources that we've mentioned. Let's try to go through it. Da pirish b'leimar, one explanation of the word leimar, shalimar atayra hu ba'ifin detan l'shayni imrasecha kaina achar keira. That when you learn Torah, you are, so to speak, mouthing Hashem's words. Remember that concept? That when Hashem gave us the Torah, basically He gave us the ability to be His conduit. So when we're learning, we are channeling His words. Hu hadgoshes inyan bittul. That is emphasizing the idea of bittul, the idea of our surrender, that we can be a conduit to Hashem's words and not get in the way. That's the idea of bittul. V'hapirish Vayidaber gomer leimer hu hamshach daseres adibreis basara Maamoris. Then there was another explanation. What does the word leimar mean? It means that when Hashem gave us the Torah, He used the Aseres HaDibros, the 10 Commandments, to infuse a new energy into the Asara Maamoris, the 10 utterances of creation. That explanation, Madgish Hamayladam Shochalamata, brings out more of the quality of how the energy is coming down low. Okay, so the first concept is Leimar means that when we speak the words of Torah, we are channeling Hashem's words. That emphasizes the concept of bittul, of surrender. Another explanation of Leimar is that when Hashem gave the 10 Commandments, He reinfused the Asara Maamoris, the 10 utterances of creation. That emphasizes the concept of Hamshach Lamata, bringing things down below. And the fact that both of those concepts in the Maamar, the Rebbe Marash's Maamar, are brought as a preface, lahapirosh, to explaining shalemer hu shayidei limar atayra dahadim gedim liyesa kadosh baruch hu keida v'shayna kenegda. The third concept, which is when we learn, we cause Hashem to learn. Hu ki kol hapirushim ha'inyanim b'leimer shaychim zelazeh. It's because all these concepts are related. So we have three concepts. One is leimar means when we learn Torah, we're channeling Hashem. Another explanation, leimar means that the 10 Commandments come down into the 10 utterances of creation. And the third concept is that when we learn Torah, we are causing Hashem to learn Torah. So the Rebbe says all of those three concepts are related. It's not three different explanations of one word. It's really three aspects of one idea, one concept. This is a very common trope. I don't know if that's a disrespectful term, but definitely the Rebbe's style is, I could tell you this. I would expect that you guys have learned what this year, 4 or 5 Maamarim with me? I think that if I would show you a Maamar of the Rebbe and Maamarim of the other Rebbeim, meaning going back to the Alter Rebbe, I don't know if you could identify what's the difference between a Maamar of the Mittler Rebbe and a Maamar of the Rebbe Marash. But I bet you would be able to say, oh, that's the Rebbe, as opposed to the other previous 6 Rebbeim. And one of the reasons is there are certain motifs that are really, really common. One of them is this analysis of the previous Rebbeim's Maamarim in a very explicit way of referencing the Maamarim and then breaking it down and almost like cataloging what they said. And this is a very, very common motif in the Rebbe's Torah. Furthermore, that the drive to condense it to one common point is also very common in the Rebbe's Torah. So basically what's happening here, I hope you're not getting too overwhelmed, but the Rebbe's taking what seems to be different details of the Rebbe Marash's Maamar and organizing it for us and saying, it's all really teaching us one underlying big idea. Okay, what that big idea is, we don't know yet, but that's what we're driving toward. Okay. Now we're in chapter 6. Okay, just the only thing you really don't get too focused on the details. The only thing I just want you to remember is the 3 ideas of what Lamar is. So one idea, Lamar means that when we learn Torah, we're channeling Hashem's words. The other idea, Lamar, means that the 10 commandments come down into the 10 utterances of creation. And the third idea, Lamar, means that when we speak words of Torah, we cause Hashem to reciprocate and speak words of Torah as well. Yeah? Okay. And that somehow these are all connected. One idea. Okay. Chapter 6. You guys are tremendous. Really, really, I commend you on your bravery and your willingness to explore and to have an adventure. This is not an entertaining class.
For that, come on Monday.
Mondays are entertaining? Compared to this. Yeah, compared to this. Okay. All right. All right. Vav, chapter 6. V'yesh loimer abir b'zeh. So the Rebbe says, perhaps we can say here's the explanation. Again, this is the Rebbe's own idea, his own insight. The Matan Torah Gimel Inyanim. Matan Torah really is 3 concepts. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Neisen Torah. Hashem, who's the giver of the Torah. V'Yisrael, Mikable Torah, the Jews who are the recipients of the Torah. V'HaTorah Atzma, Torah itself. Okay? Matan Torah has 3 parts. The giver, the recipient, and that which was given. Yeah? Okay, fine. V'achidish b'haTorah shenitna b'Matan Torah lagabi haTorah shelomdu ha'avis lifnei Matan Torah. What's novel about the Torah that was given at Sinai compared to the Torah that, let's say, for instance, the patriarchs studied before the Torah was given at Sinai? Who hein b'negel noisen Torah, v'hein b'negel mekable Torah, v'hein b'negel haTorah atzma. The novel thing that happened at the event at Sinai introduced something radical in all 3 of those aspects, in the giver of the Torah, in the recipients of the Torah, and in the Torah itself. Something radical changed, and it changed in all 3 of those elements. Now, what's the chidush in the Noisena Torah? Which is a difficult concept because theologically, the Noisena Torah is Hashem. Chidush, change, novelty in Hashem. Hashem, ani havaya lo sheni, Hashem does not change. So let's find out what this is talking about. Sha'anoichi hapsicha de Matan Torah, that this anoichi is that personal pronoun I. And that is the first word of the 10 Commandments, the first word of the revelation at Sinai. Hu rashatevas ano nafshi ksavs yehavas. It's known that the word anoichi is an acronym for a phrase. Ano, I, nafshi, myself, ksavas, wrote, yehavas, and gave. Meaning, I wrote myself and gave myself through Torah. Hashem is saying, I've given you, not my book, I've given you myself in book form. That's what Torah is. Torah is not Hashem's book. Torah and Hashem are entirely one. So Hashem has given himself through Torah. And when we say anon nafshi, myself, what we mean is his essence. You guys all know there are different levels of divine revelation. So we're talking about the deepest essence of Hashem. And he gave his deepest essence to us through the medium of Torah. Upirish hanon nafshi ksav zihavas as hot, a little bit of Yiddish, hot areingeschrieben und areingegeben sich allein, that he gave and he wrote himself and gave himself over. Him himself. Anon nafshi, me myself. The Baloshna Medrash, like it says in the Medrash, Shmeis Rabbah, Mecharti lachem teirasi k'v'yachol nimkarti imo. When I sold you, meaning transferred to you my Torah, I, so to speak, transferred myself to you. So what's the chiddush in the Noisen HaTorah? The chiddush in the Noisen HaTorah is that Hashem gave His essence to us. He gave us access to His essence.
But what they have access to before?
Something spiritual, maybe even godly, but not the essence of Hashem. Like I said, Torah is not Hashem's book. Torah is Hashem that you're accessing through the book. What they had before, godly information, but not God. Whereas we're sitting here and learning, and what we're understanding is probably not a trillionth of what the Avos could understand. And yet, we have access to Hashem's essence through our Torah learning. They didn't. Not because we're better, but because of something that radically changed at Matan Torah. Now, what radically changed regarding the recipients of the Torah? At Matan Torah, Torah was given to the bailus, to the ownership of the Jewish people. Now again, this has to be explained carefully so that we shouldn't have any theological problems, because we don't mean this in, God forbid, an antinomian way of saying, well, do whatever you want. Hashem made you the boss. You don't want to keep kosher? Yeah, you don't have to do it. I mean, it's true, you don't have to. You have bechira chovshis. But it doesn't mean... I was once talking to a guy who said, he was talking about different denominations of Judaism, which, we don't even believe in that stuff because those are just social constructs. But he was saying, your shul is Orthodox, but I saw somebody driving to your shul, so what's the difference between your shul and my shul? I said, the difference is if you ask the guy who drove to my shul if you're allowed to do what you're doing, he'll tell you, no, you're not allowed to do it. I'm not pretending the rules changed. I'm just not keeping them, right? So, of course, we have free choice to not follow the Torah, God forbid, but that's not what we mean. What we mean is, Torah le b'shamayim hi. Torah is not in heavens. Famous story in the Gemara about a rabbinic debate, and then a heavenly voice came forth and tried to settle the debate, and the rabbi said, no, the debate can't be settled from a heavenly voice because Torah was given down here, which means the ownership of Torah means that it is through the discourse of souls and bodies that we arrive at the halacha. So the bailus here that we're referring to is the fact that it's not the angels, it's not the heavenly court, not even Hashem himself who decides the final halacha. Hashem gave us the Torah, meaning he said, now you go and apply the final rulings. And whatever the rabbi says down here, that's going to have the koyach HaTorah, that will have Torah's power to it. Yeah, what do you want to say?
Can I ask a tangential question? You mentioned about driving on Shabbos. What was the Rebbe's position about inviting guests that will have to drive?
Okay, this is completely off topic.
Completely.
But I'll answer it. I never ask anybody how they're getting, where they're going. It's not my business. And I never ask anybody what they've done before they were at my house or what they're going to do after they were at my house. That's my answer. Okay, so, by the way, since you got hung up on the driving on Shabbos thing, did you hear anything I said after that? Or you got stuck on the driving on Shabbos part?
I think I heard.
I'm going to loop you back in. So now you open yourself up to get quizzed. So here, yes. So what does it mean?
This is a group quiz, right?
No, you spoke. You're going to, okay. Are you going to look in your neighbor's notes? No, that's cheating.
I'm not looking anywhere.
Okay, all right. There's a Woody Allen joke when he used to do stand-up. He said, at NYU, I flunked my metaphysics course because during the final I got caught looking into the soul of the student next to me. Okay, So what does it mean that the Jewish people were given bailus, were given ownership over the Torah? You got hung up on the Shabbos driving thing.
Something,
Okay,
everybody.
so I'm going to repeat it.
We could decide down here.
What?
We could decide down here.
Right, right. Or, for instance, probably the most powerful example of that is like, we don't have it anymore because we have an automatic calendar, but Rish Chodesh, which determines when Yom Tov is and when Korbanos are brought. So that's all done according to eyewitnesses and the Sanhedrin. So the point is that we were given that power to make these decisions. Okay. So that's the bailus kaviyachol shel Yisrael. Shahakoyach lifsaik halachos nitin dafka Yisrael. The power to come up with the final halachic ruling was given to the Jewish people. Why does he say dafka Yisrael, specifically the Jewish people? Specifically the Jewish people and not the non-Jewish people? No, that's not what he's saying. He's saying specifically the Jewish people and not Hashem himself. Hashem will not come up with the final halacha. He told us to do that. Okay, so the change in the Noisena Torah is that Hashem gave over his essence, Anon Nafshi Ksavos Yehavos. The change in the Mekabli Torah was that Yisrael were given the ability to paskin. The Ein Mashkichen Bebaskel, or like that story I mentioned earlier, that you don't listen to a heavenly voice when coming to a ruling. And in fact, even furthermore, like the end of that story, or the epilogue of that story is that Reb Nosson, the Tana, asked Eliyahu Navi, Elijah the prophet, what did Hashem think of it when the rabbis said, we don't decide a halacha according to heavenly voices? And Elijah the prophet said, Hashem laughed, he loved it. He said, my children have bested me. So this concept of the Jewish people, so to speak, being able to have one up on Hashem is that Hashem gave us this ability, like any father, he has nachas when his son is clever. So Hashem gave us this ability to paskin, and we have autonomy in that regard. Okay. And then what's the radical change that took place within Torah itself? Hu Torah shenitna b'Matan Torah hi ba'ofen shel tzivui v'gzeira shepoyel ala adam v'ha'elam liyais keiros ha'Torah. It's that Torah was now placed into a form of a commandment and a decree, which would have an effect on the person and the world to conform according to the instruction of Torah. In other words, I want everyone to just relax a little bit and turn any of your mental rigidity down a few levels. If you need to go take drugs, it's none of my business, but just, I can't deal with any super highly literal thinking right now. Okay, just let this flow. What did the Rebbe just say here? The Rebbe just said that when Torah was given at Sinai, it was given in the form of commandments, meaning the Avos had access to Torah before Matan Torah, but as information. At Matan Torah, it became a commandment. So the Rebbe says that the difference between information and a commandment, basically, we have descriptive and prescriptive statements. So descriptive statements are like, look, I'm just telling you the facts. Don't shoot the messenger. I'm just telling you this is the deal. This is what's happening. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying this is what it is. That's descriptive. Prescriptive, like a prescription, is saying this is what it should be. So this is a wild concept. I need you just to relax, and if you can't deal with it, just don't say a word, just a little bit. When Torah was given, it wasn't just that it became a suggestion. To a certain extent, the power of Torah's commandment is not just that it's prescriptive, it's actually descriptive. It becomes the reality. Now you're going to say, but it's not the reality. Yeah, you're right. We have free choice, and people don't always do what Torah says to do. But to a certain extent, what we are saying is Torah is not just an ideal to strive for, that actually when Torah was given, it made a statement, a descriptive statement about reality. Follow what we're saying. Like L'Kutei Torah, that's the Alter Rebbe, explains, B'negei l'Aseres HaDibros, regarding the Ten Commandments, Shenema b'Matan Torah, that were said at Sinai, U'metoichan ha'inyon sham muven shal derech zehu b'negei l'chol ha'tzvuim de Torah, and the Rebbe says in parentheses, and it could be extrapolated to all of the mitzvahs. The Alter Rebbe says it about the Ten Commandments, but it really could be said about all 613 commandments and about all Torah. Shenamru b'loshin tzivui v'gam loshin asid. Grammatically, the way those verbs are formulated, it's both imperative as well as future tense. Grammar nerds, you understand what I'm saying? It's both an imperative statement as well as future tense. So it's thou shalt, if you want to use the King James clumsy syntax, which seems to be so iconic still for some reason. Meaning this is what you should do. But it's also you will. You're gonna. It's a description. This is what's going to be. Ukamei light tirtzach, for instance. Light tirtzach, what does that mean? You shouldn't murder? Or it means you're not going to murder. Shu tzivui v'gam havtocha. It's both a tzivui, a commandment. It's also a havtocha. It's a guarantee. You're not going to murder. Ki adibur atzmai geizer ala adam v'ha'ilam. The speech itself decrees upon the person and the world, upayel aleim, and affects them liyeskein, that should be the reality. Now again, I can't have any rigid thinking, and you're going to tell me, but people have murdered since the Ten Commandments were given. Yeah, I know. But the point here is that Torah was not just a list of policies. Here's what should be done. Here's the protocol. Torah actually embedded into reality certain, almost call it natural law, like the law of gravity. Not a protocol, it's a fact. It's inescapable. You can't ignore the laws of gravity. Now, happens to be that when it comes to moral law, we have this crazy thing called free choice, and you can walk off a cliff and not fall. You can ignore Torah law because you are given free choice. You cannot ignore natural law. Hashem didn't give us free choice in that regard. But what we're saying is that Torah law is no less real, in fact, probably even more real than natural law. And when Torah said, Leitirtzach, it didn't just say, I don't want you to murder. It said a statement of fact. You're incapable of it. That's not you. The world is incapable of receiving it. It can't be. Cannot be. Now you're going to say, but it has been. Okay, that's an anomaly. That requires explanation. So don't come and say to me, how can the Alter Rebbe say that Leitirtzach made murder impossible? Not just unadvisable, impossible, when we know that it is possible. That's not a valid question. If you're still thinking that way, you got to relax. The question is, now that murder is impossible, how has it occurred? How has it even happened? I don't know. That we have to figure out. Okay, now go ahead. Yes.
So I'm not even that backwards, I'm thinking that forwards. Didn't we learn that this is the way we're going to live after Mashiach comes?
Okay, so very good. When Mashiach comes, we will no longer have this fragmentation. And then we will automatically follow Torah in the same way that today we follow, like, the law of gravity. You won't have to think about it. It'll become an empirical reality. Yes. Very good. Very good. Okay. So we said three elements the giver of the Torah, the recipients of the Torah itself. All three experienced a radical change when Torah was given, even though Torah existed before it was given. And people knew about Torah before it was given. But what changed? In the giver of the Torah is that Anon Nafshik Sof Yehovah, he gave his essence. In the recipients of the Torah, the Jewish people were given the koyach of the psak din, the ability to make halachic rulings, to determine what the reality is. And regarding the Torah itself, the Torah became the fact and the reality. V'hagam d'chidish zehu l'chayra rak bepu'ulas ha'Torah al ha'adam v'ha'elam lo b'Torah atzma. The Rebbe has a different question. How do we say this is a change in Torah or an innovation in Torah when we're really saying it's an innovation in the effect that Torah has on the world and on the person, not a change in Torah, makol mokim, nevertheless, kevin sheshem Torah, that the name Torah, the shmei shel kol davar meira al tchunai, the name of everything indicates its essence, like it says in chapter 1 of Shar Yuchad V'Amunah, which many of you are learning. Hu meloshin heira. Torah is the word heira. Heira means directive or instruction. So what does the word Torah mean? How do you translate it? It really means instruction. Harei achidish b'ha'ofen da heiras ha'Torah. Sheiras ha'Torah eich shadam b'ha'ilam tzrichim liyesi b'ofen shepoyelim aleim negeh la Torah atzma. So since Torah is called Torah, its name indicates what it really is all about. And Torah means heira, means instruction. So when the manner in which that instruction changes, then Torah is also changing. You understand what he's saying? He's just clarifying that you might say, oh, well, what changed at Matan Torah was the effect that Torah has on the person and the world, not Torah itself. And the Rebbe is saying, well, what is Torah? At the end of the day, the essence of Torah is how it guides and instructs the person. So if the manner in which Torah guides and instructs the person has changed, then that's an essential change in Torah. Okay.
But isn't the manner of Torah only in Olam Hasiya that changed?
No, in all worlds. In all worlds. In all worlds. Whatever that means. I mean, obviously these are parallel realities. So, what does it mean in higher worlds that something becomes a fact? It's hard to relate to non-corporeal worlds, non-time-space worlds. But yeah, it's saying that even in the lowest realms it changed. Not only in the lowest realms.
The lowest realms make sense because we're actualizing the change.
Right, and that's where it's most important anyway. Okay. Val derech zeh hu belimer Torah di Yisrael. We're continuing in chapter 6. So similarly, regarding the Torah that we learn, kimavur belukutei Torah sham, as explained there in Likutei Torah, as explained there in Likutei Torah, Da'idesh Yisrael lamed elu treifus bebehema chulu, ve'elu ksheris chulu. When the Jewish people learn, let's say for instance, the list of non-kosher and kosher animals, Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe explains, Naise birer v'havdala bein tamei letoher v'yispardu kol pei oven bedugmas hapu'ula ba'olam shenasis ha'yidei hadibre shedibra kadosh baruch hu b'matan Torah. There becomes a separation, in a good way, meaning a sorting out. You know what boirer is? It's one of the 39 prohibited forms of work. So selecting, sorting. Yeah, on Shabbos, right. On Shabbos we don't do boirer. But, thank you. So there is a birer, there's Maloshin boirer. There's a refinement, there's a sorting out that happens in the world when we learn these halachas. So it's not just, obviously, that when we keep the mitzvahs, it has a refining effect on the physical world. But even learning these halachas and knowing the Torah's viewpoint and knowing the Torah's categories and then viewing it with those categories, that has a refining effect on the world. And that refining effect on the world, the Rebbe says, is similar to and comes from, one second, Taubel dear, I'm in the middle of the Maamar class right now. Is this an emergency with the campaign? I'm recording right now. You're YouTube famous right now. Should I put you on FaceTime? Can I call you in 20 minutes when I get home? It's my daughter Taubel. Let's all thank Taubel. You hear that? Okay. All right. All right. I'll call you later. We've got this campaign going on. I never know, how important it is to take the calls. Maybe she's going to say, some philanthropist wants to wire $100,000. Why 100? Why limit it? $1 million? Okay. All right. If someone would wire $100,000 right now, actually we would be done with the campaign. Well, actually, I wouldn't say we would be done. We'd be in bonus rounds. Yeah, that would be pretty cool. Okay, so when we learn these halachas and we allow these concepts to be our way of thinking, it actually refines the physical world. And that's a power that was given to us when Torah was given at Sinai. Okay. And to add, the change that occurred in Torah that also facilitates a change in the world. Remember we said there was a change in Torah that is pronounced in the way that it affects reality. It's even more pronounced in the mitzvahs, as opposed to in the limud Torah. So there's the study and there's the application. That when you do the mitzvahs, the way that the mitzvahs are now after the revelation at Sinai, it causes a refinement in the physical object that you use in order to do the mitzvah. So when we do a mitzvah, it's not just we're racking up brownie points in heaven. We are, but that's not the main thing. When you do a mitzvah, a physical action, usually with a physical object, like let's say you're putting on tefillin, you're taking something that's mundane, that's unholy, and you're making it holy. You're elevating it to a higher spiritual status. That is a unique ability that was granted at the time of Matan Torah. And that is something you see even more in the performance of mitzvahs than you do in the study of Torah. You see it in both, but it's even more so in the performance of mitzvahs because you're employing physical objects and turning them into something holy.
It's like Yishmael in a spiritual realm.
Well, it's the opposite actually. There's a teaching from the Alter Rebbe that Hashem turns ayin into yesh, and we turn yesh into ayin. He makes the spiritual material, and we make the material spiritual. And in fact, there's a concept, and it really only occurred when Torah was given, of something called Hefza Shel Mitzvah, a mitzvah object. A mitzvah object. Like, you can't mistreat that. You can't bring that into a bathroom. You can't stack things on top of it. That's a holy object. What is a holy object? Holy is spiritual. This is a physical object. Yes, but now physical objects can become holy. Vadafilu Hefza Shel Kedusha, and in fact, even higher level than Hefza Shel Mitzvah is Hefza Shel Kedusha. So it's a physical object, and yet it's holy. So that represents the radical transformation that occurred when Torah was given, that now there's this possibility for physical things to be remain in their physical state and to be elevated to holiness. So that's really where you see the effect that Matan Torah had on the Torah itself. That before Matan Torah, Torah didn't have that power. And after Matan Torah, Torah does have that power to be transformative in the world. And again, like the Rebbe said, you might say, well, that's not the Torah itself, that's the Torah's effect on the world. But the Rebbe says, what is Torah? Torah is Meloshen Heira. Torah is all about how it affects the world. So when its effect on the world changes, then you're talking about an essential change within it. Okay, so we have these three elements of Matan Torah: the giver, the recipient, and that which was given. And all three of them experience a radical transformation at the time of the giving of the Torah.
Why is this significant to us? Like what it is now is significant. That's how we practice. That's how we relate to Torah and mitzvahs. Why is it significant to us to spend how many weeks learning that this change occurred at Matan Torah?
Your question is, why is it important to know when the change occurred, or why is it important?
When it occurred, that it occurred, as opposed to that this is the reality.
Because when you are born into a reality, you have a blind spot. So you don't even know what it is you're experiencing because you have no point of comparison. So yeah, we're learning a little history here, not because it's particularly important to try to imagine a pre-Matan Torah world. You're right, that was then, this is now. But if you really want to appreciate Torah, which we do, I mean, it's our life, we want to appreciate it, sometimes the only way to really get context for what reality is to know how different it is today than what it used to be. Now, another way to do that is to project alternative realities. Imagine if it were different, but that's theoretical. This is actually saying it was different. It was radically different. So when we understand how it was, then we could start to appreciate what is so special about what is.
We can't just appreciate what's special about what is and just highlight that this is the reality when you do a
Yeah, but
mitzvah.
what would that even mean to somebody? If I were to say to them without any context or elaboration that, Torah isn't just a moral code. Every society has moral codes. But Torah actually has an effect on the world. Okay, what's the effect on the world? That people learn it? I mean, every moral code, people learn it, and then I guess that's its effect, and how widespread it is, and how ubiquitous it is, and how famous it is. And no, that's not what I'm saying. Okay, then explain it to me. Okay, well, the only way I can explain it to you is like this. Torah is eternal. It existed before Matan Torah, and yet it was totally different than after Matan Torah. Before Matan Torah, Torah was just information. Okay, godly information, but just information, like lahavdil, any other moral code or ideology or philosophy. After Matan Torah, Torah became an agent, or the agent, for changing the nature of the physical world. And of course, this all connects to the bottom line of everything we learn. We always come back to Mashiach, that everything we're doing is leading toward Mashiach. So when you understand that Torah is not just divine information, I mean, Dayenu, obviously that's mind-blowing, divine information, but it's not, it doesn't stop there. Torah is the agent, the catalyst for turning the physical world ultimately into a reality that's holier than any of the planes of the spiritual worlds. So that's a pretty big deal. And that's important to know. And if a person wouldn't know that, they would be extremely deficient in their basic understanding of what it is that we're doing as Jews. So that's the short answer to why it's important. Okay. So we got up to chapter 7. I just want to tell you that this Maamar has 10 chapters. I think next week we can do 7, 8, 9, 10 if we hit the ground running. But I'm going to tell a quick story before we wrap it up. The YouTube consultants that I paid a bunch of money to a couple years ago, they taught me some things. I guess it worked because we have almost 25,000 subscribers now. But they said never use like concluding language because people click away they'll click away faster than you can, whatever, I don't know the idiom for it. But so I used concluding language already. I said next week. Oh, next week. I'll see you next week. Okay. So, but at any rate, I just want to tell you a story. I just got a text from a guy right now. I'm kind of cognizant of it. So this guy, it's a whole long story, and at some point the story will be revealed, but this is somebody who had been interacting with my content on YouTube for about 4 or 5 years, and I never knew he existed until about 2 months ago. And he reached out to me. He's like, me and my buddy have been watching your content. We want to meet you. So we met at the aisle. I gave him a tour of the SoulWords house, and I showed him what's going to be. Crazy story. Later on, I want to tell you the whole story. But basically, these 2 young guys in their 30s living in Manhattan have been watching my content and feeling like connected to me, even though they never met me in real life until, like I said, a couple months ago. Anyways, I can't give too many details here, but a bunch of stuff started. After he came to the aisle, he said a bunch of stuff started clicking in his life in like a really crazy way. And I said, listen, this is not surprising to me. You know, people go to the aisle and miracles start happening. So like don't get too freaked out. So he's like, yeah, but you know, I need some grounding. So happened to have been that he had just given a very significant gift toward the campaign. Like, you know, 5-figure gift. So I said, well, first of all, I want to tell you that you're right. You do need grounding because, like, when spiritual stuff starts popping off in your life, it can get destabilizing, even when it's good stuff. So I said, you do need grounding. I said, the most grounding thing is tzedakah, because tzedakah is very physical. It's money that you use to procure physical things, and you know, there's nothing more material than money. Now, if you worship the money itself, it becomes materialism, God forbid. But if you use the money as a tool, then you're transforming the material into spiritual. So I said, giving tzedakah is really, really healing, and Baruch Hashem, you've done that. You already did that. So if you hadn't done it yet, I would tell you to do it now. I mean, it doesn't have to be a 5-figure gift. You could put $1 in a pushka, but tzedakah, 100%, very grounding, very like embodying. It gets you back into your body. It gets back into the physical world. But you did that, thank God. So I said, I really think you need something physical and grounding, and I'm going to tell you to put on tefillin. So he's like, okay, well, you know, yeah, maybe, I don't remember what he said, like in a couple weeks. So I said, no, every day of tefillin. You got to put on tefillin today. So I said, I'm going to call the cipher right now, and I'll call you back. So I was getting ready. Last night, you know where I was last night? Manhattan. Yeah, because I went to an engagement party last night. So this guy lives in Manhattan. So I said to him, okay, I'm going to stop. I'm going to buy the tefillin. I'm going to take them to Manhattan. I'll see you in Manhattan tonight. I guess I hung up too quickly because I didn't even really understand he wasn't in New York. He was in another city on the East Coast, but not in New York. He texts me, and he's like, Rabbi, I got to tell you, I'm not in Manhattan. He says, I'm in, he named the other city. I'm trying to respect his privacy. I'm in another city on the East Coast. He says, I'm sitting in my room. I'm visiting home, my parents' home. I'm sitting in the room where I grew up. And he said, I want to tell you something. He said, I grew up Reform. I really was never taught to put on tefillin. He said the only time I put on tefillin really was when the mitzvah tank guys, and he lives in Manhattan, so the mitzvah tank guys put on tefillin with him. He says, when you hung up the phone, I started looking around my room, my childhood room, and I saw a box. This just happened yesterday. He says, I saw a box, and I was like, what's in this box? And I opened the box, and there's a pair of tefillin. So I'm like, put the tefillin on right now. I said, we're going to get it checked. I mean, we don't know. He doesn't know who gave it to him. He doesn't know, the kashrut status of it. So I said, we'll get it checked to make sure it's kosher. I said, but you put it on right now. And I sent him a video, actually, that I had produced a number of years ago about how to put on tefillin. And I just see he texted just now, hopefully to confirm. Let's just see that he put on tefillin. Thank you for the reminder. Yep, put it on again today. Having my iPhone daily reminders now so I don't forget. By the way, when I get back to New York City, is my local mitzvah tank, there's one block away from me, able to check my tefillin, or does this require someone more specialized? Okay, whatever. I'm going to answer him as soon as we wrap up over here. Okay, he's going to go to the mitzvah tank guy and ask him to check his tefillin. We're going to get it all sorted out. But at any rate, that is a story. This story is way more crazy and miraculous than I'm indicating right now. Way more. I'm trying to respect his privacy, so I'm not telling you the details. But basically, this started as a guy watching a bunch of words on a screen, not even real words, computer-generated noises that were originally me speaking into this device, uploaded to another device, coming out of another device, right? So you're talking about something that's so out in the ether, and yet what does it lead to? Something so physical, he's putting on tefillin. So that's what we're talking about when we say Torah changed and the world changed when Torah was given at Sinai, is that it's not just ideas anymore. It's physical reality. And that's, again, I'm sorry, forgive me for this fundraising pitch, but why we're creating the physical SoulWords house a block away from the Ohel, because we want to have a physical space. We want to give a physical grounding to everything that we're doing, because that's really the point of why Torah was given, and that's the point of Mashiach, is that it's something that happens here in the physical plane. And now I'm going to give my concluding language. We'll make everybody click away. Bye-bye.